Hey everyone, we're going to get started in just a moment. I would encourage folks to let us know in the chat where you are in the world, how you're feeling, what you're bringing into today's practice. All right, y'all, welcome to today's Self-Care Sunday with Heal and with WellSet. My name is Aubree Henderson. I will be leading today's practice. I am a self-love coach. I also am one of the instructors at WellSet. I teach on all things self-love, a whole lot about self-care, boundaries, communication, self-esteem, all of these things. And so would encourage you to, join us over on WellSet and check out some of those classes that are available. If you aren't already familiar with WellSet, it is the first digital holistic health studio for mind, body, and emotional well-being. And so it's great. It is a resource of so many modalities and practices, right? It has practices like Ayurveda, it has yoga, journaling, sound healing, coaching, right, as evidenced by me being on the platform, acupressure, EFT, all kinds of practices that are just meant to nourish you and support your overall holistic well-being. It is a membership to thousands of live and on-demand classes. And so that means that you can join classes live, very similar to how you're joining right now in real time. But there's also a really robust catalog of classes and practices in, again, all of these modalities that you can sort by, what you're struggling with in the moment, what you're feeling, what you hope to feel after class. And so cannot speak positively enough about WellSet. It can help you reduce your stress, your anxiety, shift your habits, boost your mood, improve sleep, all of these things. So again, really recommend that you check out WellSet. It's tagged and pinned in the comments, as is my profile if you'd like to go follow me and learn more about me and my work. But again, my name is Aubree Henderson. I practice as a self-love coach, and it's exactly what it sounds like. I help folks learn to love themselves more deeply. And often that is through practicing boundary setting and communication in our relationships. It's also through practicing what self-love actually looks like. And so that's what I'm hoping to dig into in the practice with you today, is to create a daily practice around self-love that is customized to you. And so that's what I'm hoping we'll accomplish today. It'll be, something where if you have something to take notes with handy, it could be helpful. But it's also something that you don't need to feel like you need to be writing. If you're somebody who processes better by listening, that is a-okay. But by the end of this class today, you will have a daily self-love practice for you to engage in that is customized to you. So before we jump into this material, I'm going to invite you to do what I invite everyone to do before every class with me, which is to ground and to get present, right? You're joining me on Instagram, which means that, you maybe are just coming from doing something else with your phone, or perhaps you were just having a phone conversation with somebody, or maybe you're listening to this while you're doing dishes or cooking, which is what I love to do on Sundays, any number of things. And so I like to just take a moment for us to get present in our bodies, right? No matter what you're doing, no matter where you are. So what I'll invite you to do is, if possible, if it's safe to do so, to just close your eyes and move your body into a comfortable position, right? So if you're sitting, just steady yourself a little bit. If you're standing, you can do this too, right? You can steady your feet. And again, only closing your eyes if it feels safe and comfortable for you to do so, but really taking a moment to tune into what's happening in your body. Taking a nice big inhale through your nose and an exhale through your mouth. Continuing to breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth. Taking a second to just feel yourself land in your body. Noticing any emotions that you're bringing into the space. Any sensations in your body that you're bringing into the space. I see folks in the chat talking about, different healing processes we might be in. Taking a minute to acknowledge where you're coming from and what you're experiencing. Taking a couple more breaths here. And remembering that anytime you feel overwhelmed or stressed out or unmotivated or any number of just destabilizing feelings, you are able to return here on your own to this calmer, more grounded space simply by closing your eyes and returning to your breath. And now you can feel free throughout the rest of class to continue that sort of mindful, intentional breathing. That on its own is an incredible self-care and self-love practice, right? To be able to kind of regulate and ground your body through something as straightforward and as human as breathing. So with that, welcome to today's practice. I am going to do a lot of sharing and a lot of just giving sort of an overview and a structure to this idea of a self-love practice. And what I invite you to do as you're listening, as you're tuning in, to really begin to think about your own life, thinking about this through the lens of what you have going on, right? The dimensions of your life where self-love feels like it might be lacking or feels like it really needs support, right? And kind of tuning into what resonates for you. There may be things that I share and that I talk about today that don't feel as relevant or as resonant for you. And that's okay, right? I invite you to take what works and leave what doesn't, because that may work instead for someone else. So with that, I'm going to just talk a little bit about, definitions for when I'm talking about self-love and self-care, right? We're here through our Self-Care Sundays series, collaboration with WellSet and with Heal. And so, the idea of self-care, I think, is something we talk about a lot, and self-love feels related, but not quite the same. So when I'm talking about self-love, which is the practice that we're going to work with and cultivate today, self-love is an emotional state or mindset that is centered on appreciation and gratitude for yourself, right? It is a mindset, it's an emotional state that's centered on gratitude, on appreciating yourself, right? How can I feel gratitude for myself or appreciate myself or love myself, right? And this looks a lot of different ways. This might just mean you generally think positively about yourself, which is great. This might mean that you are taking time for activities and things that bring you joy, right? It's making choices that allow you to have positive emotions and experience joy. This might look like a spiritual practice, right? This might look like any number of things, right? But this practice of self-love and the way that we practice this is also through something called self-care. And so self-care is more about the sort of action plan, the practices that are needed in order to nourish and cultivate that sense of self-love. So self-care is going to look a lot more like the practices that it takes to reach that emotional state of self-love. And so the terms in this conversation today might be used a little bit interchangeably, but really when I'm talking about self-love, I'm talking about an emotional state. I'm talking about a mindset. I'm talking about what we're working toward, right? This is my, entire kind of center of my work as a self-love coach, is helping folks to reach and be able to access this emotional state. Self-care are the things that get us there, right? And that can include any and all, of these different modalities that we teach on WellSet, for example, right? Coaching can be a part of that, right? It's what we do to help people get to that point. And so today we're going to talk really about both. And so, I want to also say, when I talk about self-love and when I talk about self-care, we're going to talk a lot about things that produce positive, good feelings, right? But self-care and self-love are not about being free of accountability for our actions, right? Self-care and self-love are not about, necessarily having to always feel happy or always feel good or positive or joyful, right? And these are also things that don't have to be expensive or luxurious, right? We think about self-care, and I think often people will feel like, well, self-care is inaccessible to me because I've been taught that self-care is about going to a spa and having a professional massage and all, buying myself nice stuff and all of these things, right? And I guess that could be a version of what self-care looks like for you. But self-care can also look like closing your eyes and taking a breath, right? Something that is completely free to you and that isn't, inaccessible in that way. And so, I want us to also release our ideas that might restrict us in how we're thinking about self-love and self-care, because these concepts are something that is accessible in different ways to any person. And so with that, I'm going to talk about a couple of different dimensions of human wellness and thus dimensions of self-care. And, when we think about, okay, what are all the things that make up a person's overall holistic wellness and how good they feel and how good they feel in the world? The first one we think of for many people is physical, right? Your physical wellness. We're talking about like your concrete, tangible physical health, right? We're talking about your, physical safety as you move through the world, right? These things are physical wellness. But there's also many other dimensions of wellness, right? We have mental wellness. So thinking about, your mind and your thoughts and your mental health, right? And, how able you are to focus on things that you want to be focused on. Emotional health, right? Emotional wellness is another dimension, which feels connected to mental wellness, but is different, right? How are you feeling emotionally in the world? Are you feeling like your emotions are nourished or paid attention to or valid? We have then environmental self-care, right? The context we put ourselves in, right? Our environmental wellness. That's both, of course, like the literal environment, right? And the environment where we are and how it's being taken care of or not and how that's impacting us. But it's also about, the context we put ourselves in, the spaces we find ourselves in the world, right? We have relational and social wellness, right? How well we are in each of our relationships with other humans. This is a place where I focus a lot of my coaching and a lot of my teaching, because this one often has a really big impact and feels really tough for folks to engage with. So if that resonates for you and you're like, oh yeah, it's my relationships that are struggling, my relational wellness, that's something we'll come back to in just a moment. But just know you are not alone. We think about something like sexual wellness, right? If that is a dimension that applies to you, that's how we embrace or don't embrace our sexuality, right? And how we, then connect with others in that dimension. And then finally, spiritual wellness, right? And this can look different for every person, right? Some folks really feel a deep sense of spirituality or spiritual wellness. Some people don't really connect with that, and that's a-okay, but that is a dimension for many people. And so thinking about, those, I believe there's 7 dimensions of wellness, I want you to think about and just take a moment to reflect in your own life. If there's an area or two that you're like, oh yeah, I really am struggling there, right? I'm struggling with my environmental wellness. I'm not liking the environments that I'm in, or, oh yeah, that I struggle in my relationships, right? My social wellness is not great. Take a moment and think about which of those feel like maybe you're struggling the most, right? Or they could use the most support. And so again, I'll repeat them. Physical wellness, right? Your body, your health. Mental wellness. So your mind, your thoughts, mental health. Emotional wellness. So how you're able to understand your feelings, how you're able to communicate those, how you relate to those, to your emotions. Environmental wellness, so both the literal natural environment around you, but also the spaces you put yourself in, your places you spend a lot of time. Social relational wellness, so how are your relationships doing? Sexual wellness, again relating to your sexuality, sexual practices, and then finally spiritual wellness, whatever that means to you. And so feel free to drop in the chat if you'd like. I see some folks have, if there are ones of these that stick out to you and that you really struggle with, You can either, note those for yourself, share them in the chat, whatever feels good for you, but making sure that you note them, because what I'm going to share next is I'm briefly just going to talk through some examples of practices within each of these dimensions of wellness that are, known to promote feelings of self-love, right? These feelings are mindsets associated with self-love, having gratitude for oneself, right? Increasing your positive feelings toward yourself, your confidence in the world. And so I'll talk through these for each dimension, and I hope all of them are helpful, but particularly make sure you're listening in for the practices in the dimension where you said you were struggling, right? Because these are going to be practices that can really, potentially support you. And if there's something you hear that you're like, ooh, I think I should try that, I'd encourage you to jot it down for yourself, right? Because you see what's happening here is you're building this daily self-care practice, right? This daily self-care ritual. And so for each of these, I'll talk about some different examples. Something I'd encourage you to think about as we're thinking through this is realistically, how much time do you have in a given day in your life? How much space to add in a practice? And I want you to be really honest. The answer might be, I have 0 time, I have negative time, in which case I'm going to say, great, we're going to choose a practice for you that is short. Something that is very short, I'm talking 30 seconds, right? I can give you some practices here that take 30 seconds. And I can give you some practices that take 30 minutes, right? These are, I'm going to give you some flexible options, but that's something I want you to really think about as you're choosing a daily self-care practice or practices, thinking about what amount of time can I realistically commit to this? Even self-care that takes 30 seconds is powerful and meaningful when you can practice it consistently. I like it more if you can choose a 30-second practice and you can stick to it and do it a majority of days, more days than not. That's even better to me than if you say you can do a 30-minute, but you actually can't, and then it never happens, right? The practice we're going to do is the best practice for us. So with that, thinking for yourself, okay, which are my dimensions I really want to focus in on? I'm going to offer some practices. So we think about physical self-care, physical wellness, right? And so, we're talking physical wellness is the dimension, physical self-care is what we're practicing. I think for many of us, we think right to stuff for our health. I know for me, diet culture has been a big thing for me. So I think about diet and exercise. And those things can absolutely be parts of a physical wellness practice, right? Maybe you every day take a moment to set your phone aside while you're eating and really pay attention to and savor what you're eating and have a moment of gratitude for your body, for that experience, right? Maybe it's something like that. Maybe it's you like to go for a run every morning because it makes your body feel so good and it makes you feel so confident in yourself. If that is your journey, I love that for you. Personally, that is not mine, so that wouldn't be the practice I would choose. But it could be something in that dimension. It could be taking a short walk or moving your body. It could be, opening a window and getting some sun on your skin and generating some vitamin D, right? It could be remembering to take your medication that is prescribed to you. It could be, I'm going to eat a piece of produce a day. Different sizes, different, it's a choose your own adventure. It's like the choose your own size paper towel, right? You can, bite off chunks as large or as small of this as feel good to you. But these are some ways that we might practice self-care and cultivate self-love in the physical dimension. And, when we think about then mental self-care, it can look really similar, right? It can look like, we might traditionally think, mental health, is this go to therapy? Maybe. Going to therapy would be a great example of mental or emotional self-care, right? Having a space that you go to that is committed and centered on your mental health is a great ritual. It could also be, not necessarily having a therapist, but, doing some reading about mental health from, an expert in the field, right? It could also be downloading an app that, helps you play brain games every day that help you feel soothed at the beginning of your day, right? Any number of these things. This sort of begins to bleed into emotional self-care, but emotional self-care could be something I think even more a little bit self-directed, like just gaining emotional fluency, right? Learning how to talk about your feelings, how to describe your feelings. And at the beginning, this can look like taking a moment to ask yourself, again, it could be 30 seconds. to ask yourself each day, how am I feeling? And taking a minute just to acknowledge and recognize that feeling within yourself. Taking a moment to name it, right? Whether that's writing it down, whether that is sharing it with another person, but taking a moment to name that emotion. And then learning to practice kind of acknowledging that emotion, holding space for that emotion, right? This is a practice of emotional self-care. Could also be journaling, writing, just expressing your feelings in any way. Could be going to therapy, could be talking to a friend who validates your emotional experience, or a friend who has shared about their emotions with you as well, right? Could be any of these things. We talk about environmental self-care, right? That could be that you're a climate activist and you're like, I don't like what's happening to our planet and I'm going to fight back against it because I care about the environment in a global sense. I love that. That's amazing. It could also be saying, oh, sitting in this dark room makes me feel crappy. I'm going to move into a room with natural sunlight, right? I'm going to move into a space where it's brighter because I know that feels better for me. Or I'm going to clean my desk because the clutter is stressing me out and I know I'll immediately feel better if I just take a moment to clear my desk. Imagine doing that every day, right? That also then decreases hopefully how much you have to do each day. But even taking that daily moment, daily ritual to clear your space, because you know that environmental change is going to make a difference to your felt experience, right? It's an act of love towards yourself. We think about social wellness, relational wellness, right? To me, the big one here is, if you're struggling in that area, 9 times out of 10, there's going to be something around boundaries that will support you, right? When we are struggling and we feel like we are being sort of emotionally vampired by others, boundaries are your best friend. And a boundary can be set in 30 seconds, right? If this feels extremely daunting to you, I teach so many classes about boundaries on the WellSet platform. So please be encouraged and go check those out. But boundaries are a great example of a daily self-care practice, right? Engaging with boundaries, learning how to communicate and express your needs to others, right? Creating rituals to help connect you with the people that you love, right? These are all great options in that realm. Something with sexual self-care often really relates to the same things I would say with other types of relational social self-care, right? Setting boundaries, learning how you really feel and how to communicate that in a clear way, right? And being able to be upfront with others and advocate for yourself. And that's, to me, self-advocacy is the ultimate act of self-love. And then finally, spiritual self-care. This one could perhaps be the most varied because there are just so many spiritual practices. Maybe you have a daily prayer practice, right? That makes you feel more at peace, more able to move through the world. Amazing. I love that. It could also be that you just take a moment to, reflect on life and what it means to you and your personal values and philosophy, right? This could also be about, doing some reading about a cause that really matters to you, right? Anything that connects you with a sense of purpose can be a daily, spiritual self-care practice. So with that, I'm going to wrap us up, and I'm just going to say, through all the practices that were listed, take a moment to acknowledge and recognize which of them really stuck out to you. If there was anything that really resonated as like, yeah, I could try that, I would invite you to, go ahead and try this week one of these self-care practices that you've heard, right? And extra credit, you can practice it every day and begin that process of building it into a daily practice. So I just want to thank you all so much for joining today. It has been so great to be with all of you, to spend this time together, and just want to say thank you for giving yourself this moment of self-care and self-love on a Sunday. So again, my name is Aubree Henderson. I am here on Instagram. My handle is pinned in the comments, but it's at Aubree, A4 H's BREE. And please follow WellSet as well. And again, really encourage you to check out the platform, become a member, and join me in a class there in the future. Thanks so much, y'all. Enjoy your Sunday.